JC here. I want to say, first of all, my apologies for this video being late. Our family came back from vacation this past weekend, and I got to tell you, for some reason, several of us in the family were just not feeling extremely great. So I'm running a little bit slower this week than typical. But on a regular basis, the videos will be out usually the week ahead of time. So we won't have this problem again. But let's dive in and just talk a little bit about this idea of cultural intelligence and what it is, right? We've all heard of IQ, right? You've heard of IQ before, the intelligence quotient, EQ, emotional, quotient, which is emotional intelligence. And now we have this concept that we're going to be looking at over the next several weeks, which is cultural intelligence, right? And I would say for great leadership, two of the three are really important. I know a lot of great leaders who are not necessarily high in intelligence, but they're really high in emotional intelligence. And then I would say in the new global marketplace where we're going, you're going to have to be extremely high in cultural intelligence, especially if you decide to work with some kind of a global organization or something along those lines. You're going to have to be able to interact with people from different backgrounds and different beliefs, people who think and see the world differently than how you see it. And so it starts off in the preface, and it just says this, that many leadership and management books give us the idea that leadership is a universal skill set that works the same anywhere. It sounds promising, but it doesn't jive with the realities of leading in today's multifaceted, globalized world. And one of the examples it gave was talking about in a room somewhere overseas that wasn't here in the United States. This person was asked, point out the leader in the room, point out the obvious leader in the room. And the person was able to do it within 2 seconds flat. Well, it's that person right there. And in the US context, that would have been correct. That leader probably had the traits that we would look at in the US and say, that's a great leader, right? Maybe a lot of drive, strong personality, charisma, all that stuff. But that same personality that works in the United States is not going to work overseas. So it's just important for us to understand these kind of things. That's what cultural intelligence is. It's understanding that when you walk into rooms, different rooms are going to require different things from you, especially when you're dealing, again, on a global basis. And so it's going to be important with wherever you're desiring to go that you've got this idea, not this idea, but that you have this cultural intelligence. You're able to lead in different kind of surroundings. I'm just going to kind of keep reading through the book here. I underlined several things that I wanted us to talk about. On page 3, leadership today is a multicultural challenge. Few of us need to be convinced of that. We're competing in a global marketplace, managing a diverse workforce, and trying to keep up with rapidly shifting trends. Okay, obviously we know that. You just take a look around you. And again, this book has a lot of great examples, so make sure you're diving into the book so that you're reading some of these really great examples. He talks about the important, and I've felt this before, even just in the US, how incredible it is to live in a world where you can wake up in San Diego and have breakfast and have dinner in New York City that same evening. That's incredible. But you can also do this on a global scale. It might take a few more hours, but within a 24-hour period, you can have breakfast in San Diego and then 24 hours later be having breakfast again or some other kind of meal in a different corner of the world, South America, Africa, Asia. That's the kind of world that we're living in. He then talks a little bit about the myths, the global leadership myths. Myth number 1, he says, is that leadership is a sixth sense, okay? And that there are people who are just born leaders and they follow their gut. And there's some truth to that, okay? When people say that leadership is a sixth sense, there are some people, you've probably met them, I certainly have met them, where they just intuitively understand people, human nature, and leadership in general. So there is some truth to that, but I would say that that's not what this book is talking about. The myth is that is a global thing, that if you can lead well in the US, that you're going to lead well all across the world, and that's just not the case, right? Different cultures require different skills and abilities from their leadership. Myth number two, and this was a struggle for me a little bit because I love this book that he's referring to, Thomas Friedman, The World is Flat, which came out, I don't know, 20 years ago, and really started looking at, hey, the world isn't this complex thing anymore. It's with new technologies, it's becoming much more flattened, and people can reach out. Whereas, when I was growing up, if you wanted to reach out to somebody in Japan or somebody, in Europe, it would take weeks, if not months. I remember a friend of mine, we were fascinated by the royal family in England. So this was back in second or third grade. And it was back when Charles and Diana and that whole thing, and I'm dating myself here. Most of you probably have no clue what I'm talking about. But it was back in the day when they were getting married. So we were just kind of enthralled by the royal family. So we decided to write to Princess Diana, and we wanted, to hear something back. Well, we wrote a letter as kids. She obviously didn't write us back, but we did get an email, or not an email. See, I'm dating myself again. We did get a letter back from Buckingham Palace. It was it was a very cool thing, especially when you're that young and you feel like, oh my goodness, Princess Diana reached out to us. But I'll tell you, it took weeks, and I remember we wrote it, and then I completely forgot about it. And then the other student's mom came in one day and said, hey, we have this thing, we want you to see it. You actually got an email back. Not an email, again, there were no emails back in that day. You got a letter back. It was a letter that came in an envelope. And it was a cool thing, but it was just weeks, maybe even months before we ever got anything back. It was just a different world. Today, you can do this kind of stuff in emails, right? So the world is flat, but what he's talking about is it's still complex, right? And we still have to understand that there's different ways of moving in different parts of the world. So yes, it is flat, but there's still complexities that we have to understand. Myth number three talks about if no one follows, you aren't leading. Is that the one he gave the example? No. He says, surely a leader with no followers might not be leading, or he or she is attempting to lead in the wrong context. Leadership is not only about values and the style of leader, as evidenced by the findings in the Globe study referenced earlier. Not all followers want the same thing from leaders, right? Some followers want larger than life charismatic leaders like Bill Clinton. Others want modest, understated, practical leaders like Angela Merkel, right? This is explained by an idea known as implicit leadership theory, which states that whether you lead effectively is not based on your leadership skills. It's also a reflection of your followers' expectations of leaders as well. And again, in different places of the world, people have different expectations of leaders. So that's important for us to understand. And then number four, it talks about matrix models are better suited for leading across borders. Many companies have moved away from headquarters-centric models of leadership to matrix models. Reporting lines go in multiple directions. Teams are co-located, and decision-making is more collaborative than top-down. Most of the world, it states, though, prefers, that's kind of a US-based model. Most of the world prefers the hierarchical style of leadership in which authority lines are explicit and followers are given clear, specific directions. Years ago, I was in ministry, and I was in a very large church here in San Diego County, and they had a Hispanic ministry. And I tried to come in with my US-based kind of model of leadership and empowerment, and it's flat leadership, and we all have a say, and nothing worked. And I remember I sat down with one of the members of my department, that I was in charge of, and so this was in the Hispanic congregation. He said, hey man, you got to understand that you are the leader, and these people see you as the leader, and you need to step in that role and become the leader. You need to lead with strength. And I'd never had anybody tell me of that before. I thought I had a strong personality, but it was different. I was trying to lead based on a US model. And I remember when that clicked, and I was able to step in with that context and step into that role and lead the way that group needed me to. This, what was a ministry, I guess we could say, but this department, this ministry blew up. And I mean that in a good way. It really took off because I understood that context now. They wanted strong, decisive leadership. Okay. But then when I left there and I went to the last church that I was at, and I spent a few years there and I was leading, I tried to take that same model and it did not work. So I had to revert back to, okay, empowering leadership, letting other people shine, I've got to get all their input. Everyone has to feel like they have a say. So once I understood that, then that same group begin to take off as well. So it's just, you got to understand where you are and what people need. And U.S. leadership books could work very well in the U.S., but they may not work in other places. Okay. So then he talks about cultural intelligence. And here's what I want us to understand. Cultural intelligence is not a thing. It is a process. It's not a thing. It is a process. And that's what we're really going to be talking about over the next several weeks, where he kind of talks here on page 33. He talks about this idea of cultural competence, which is an umbrella term to refer to one's ability to understand, appreciate, and interact with people from different backgrounds and cultures. That's cultural competence. Cultural intelligence is much different. Okay, it's a four-step process, and it's what we're going to look at. It's what the book talks about. I'm trying to see if I can find it. Okay, so step one, which is what we'll get to in week 3, is CQ drive. That's motivational dimension, which gives us the energy and self-confidence to pursue the needed understanding and planning necessary for a particular cross-cultural project. Step 2, CQ knowledge, which is cognitive dimension, provides us with an understanding of basic cultural issues that are relevant to this project. Step 3 is CQ strategy. So that's cultural strategy, metacognitive dimension, allows us to draw on our cultural understanding so we can plan and interpret what's going on in the situation. And then step 4 is CQ action, cultural action, which provides us, excuse me, with the ability to engage in effective, flexible leadership for this task. So we've got to understand that this whole idea of cultural intelligence is not like you can read the book, find the definition, and all of a sudden say, hey, I'm now culturally intelligent. No, it's a process that we're going to have to work through. And hopefully by the end of this class, through answering really tough questions about ourselves. Next week, one of the assignments, or with the podcast, I'm going to ask you to be very reflective, and I'm going to ask a question, and it's based on some of our reading in the book, but I want you to think deeply about this question that I'm going to ask of you, okay? So there you have it. So here's just what I want you to write out, okay? And we'll start getting more reflective in the weeks to follow, but here's what I want you to write out for this one. What are the 4 myths, okay, of global leadership? I just went through those, and they're in the book. So you can, if you got the book, you just find the book and write those out. You don't have to give the definitions, just write out the 4 myths. And then what is the 4-step process of cultural intelligence? And that's all I want you to do this week. And then starting next week, we'll begin to get more reflective in our answers. I'm looking forward to this class with you, and make sure you're reading this book. A lot of good information in there that will help all of us on this journey to become more culturally intelligent. Thanks so much for listening, for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.